Well, hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of Guitar Talk. We like to talk about guitars. We love the old ones, the new ones, and all the odd styles and the players who've made them famous. And we hope you come away from this with a little bit more knowledge than maybe you had, or maybe you could share some with us and let us know if you've got an interesting guitar that you'd like to talk about. Today's guest, I'm really excited to have here. I've seen him play going back to the 80s and the highlight of the Providence blues scene when we had Lupo's and the Last Call Saloon and all those great places. I used to go see him with a band called Stormin' Norman and the Hurricanes. And he's since then played with just about every blues luminary that you can think of. He hosts a very successful Sunday afternoon program in Warwick at the Villa, and he's had a lot of great guitars, and we're going to talk about a couple of real interesting pieces today. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome Tom Ferraro.
Thanks, Mike.
Tom, welcome aboard.
Great to be here.
Thanks for being here, man. We appreciate it.
Well, it's great to be here. I love what you're doing, and I must say right away, happy birthday, Mike.
Well, thanks. Yes, folks, it is my birthday. Another trip around the sun. So what got you into the blues and the jazz and R&B styles that you've really done a great job of mastering?
Well, thank you. Very kind. And it started with me, believe it or not, on the accordion. As a child, I played the accordion, and like all good Italian boys do, my mother and father loved the fact that I would play the accordion. My brother played piano.
Yep.
And this is in the 60s, and you know, guitar was just starting to have that renaissance when the Beatles came out.
Yes.
And I had two cousins that played guitar. And when my trial period ended with accordion, the teacher at the school that I went to said, well, if you want to pick another instrument, you can play the instrument. I picked the guitar. In fact, my teacher encouraged it because he said, do you like playing the accordion? And I said, well, yeah, I really like it. I was a kid. And he said, well, do you like the Beatles? And I said, oh, yeah, I love the Beatles. And he said, you ever see anybody in the Beatles play the accordion?
Right.
So I switched to the guitar. And then I got into old music right away because I had an uncle that passed away, and we would go see my aunt, and I would just be bored. I was a little kid, and my uncle was a record collector, so he had all 78s.
Nice.
So I got to listen. He was into jazz, so I was listening to Django Reinhardt and people like that. So,
and
Les Paul.
Doesn't get too much better than Django.
I didn't know anything about him. I mean,
right.
And this is before the internet. It's before, instant communication. So I would go to the library and read, and then I found out that he really was, not really playing with a whole left hand.
Yeah, it's unbelievable what he accomplished.
Yeah.
In the accordion, I think it's coming back into fashion again. I did a gig last night with an accordion player, and it had such a majestic and beautiful sound. And there's that guy in Rhode Island,
Corey Pesaturo. He's unbelievable.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
He plays with my old teacher Ron Murray from time to time, and it's exceptional what they accomplish. But, well, that's great that brought you into the guitar. Now you've worked in these last couple of decades with just about everybody. It's probably hard to remember all the standout gigs, but are there a couple that really jump out where you got to play with somebody you admired and just went, wow?
Yeah, I was lucky. I came up at the right time, and when I was with Norman, we would get to back up a lot of people. We were kids. We were just starting out, but we get to meet all the Chicago guys that would come in town, and then you'd see them year after year. But I had some great gigs with Hubert Sumlin, who played with Howlin' Wolf.
Yeah.
He was great to work with. A guy that a lot of people might not know, he's from Mississippi originally, but lives in Rochester, New York, is a guy named Joe Beard. And he's like a Mississippi Delta guy, and he was great to work with. Rod Carey was a bass player that I worked with a long time ago.
Monster player,
Rod went with Ronnie Earl, and when Ronnie couldn't do gigs, like to back up these guys, Rod would always try to get me on the gig. So I got to work with a few of those guys. And playing with Ronnie or Duke was always a pleasure. And another guy, one of my favorite guys, and one of the nicest people you'll ever meet was, is Anson Funderburg. And
fantastic player.
Great player. A lot of people don't, when they first hear him, they go, gee, it just seems so simple, but you try to do it.
Yeah, and then it's not simple.
It's not simple.
Right.
And Anson would always, I always got to play, come on and sit in, come and do some tunes.
And I find with the blues in general that people that are new to the music, it's easy to think initially, well, that doesn't seem that hard. And then you go to do it and you're immediately humbled.
Right.
Because there's such a history,
Yeah.
and there's nothing easy about it, and
Right.
you have to learn more than just notes on a fingerboard to be playing blues music.
Exactly.
You've got to have that feel, that soul. You've got to know what that music is. It's like you really have to listen to it for years before you can play it well, you know?
You know, in my case, and I think a lot of guys that would, at my time, we grew up playing like anybody. I listened
Yep.
to blues and I liked it. I was listening to jazz, but I didn't know how to play it. So
Yeah.
I gravitated towards rock. Like, you know, the guys when we were kids starting to play
We
out,
all did, right.
they were looking at me like I was, hey, what are you doing? I don't want to play this. Let's play, you know, Cream or Zeppelin
Yep.
or all that. So I did that for a little while. I was not good at it. And I said, you know what? I can't, I just don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And I liked it. And I said, I have to relearn how to play. And I stopped playing for almost 2 years. I just quit and tried to get everything out of my system and then go back and relearn. And I started listening to the old stuff.
Yeah.
And I had to, you know, get the rock
And
influences
being
out.
from Rhode Island, I mean, you got to hear a lot of great players
Yeah,
that were right from the area. I mean, when I think of Rhode Island blues guitar players, right up at the top of the pile, we got to say Duke Robillard.
Well, it's funny you mention that because I remember, you know, not knowing enough locally what was going on.
Yeah.
And I forgot what the club was, but here I am like 21 years old, and I said, well, everybody's telling me there's good players into this. You know, because I grew up in an area where nobody was into this music. It was the height of the disco era.
Yes.
And so I remember going to, it might have been the Met, it might have been the old, probably was the Met, and I heard Duke. And knowing that, because I listened to Les Paul when I was younger, and Oscar Moore, and all these great obscure,
Yeah.
not that Les Paul was obscure, but guys that were on, Billy Butler, you know, Bill Jennings, guys that the average person didn't know. And I listened to Duke, and I remember walking out of there saying,
Your head spins.
yeah, I said, if this guy is local,
Right.
I've got no chance.
Right.
And then there was Ronnie was there. There was
Yeah.
another guy from Providence. Two of these people have passed away. Paul Murphy was a great player.
Murph was great.
Tommy Enright, who I became very good friends with. Rob Nelson, who's
Yes.
a great player. And these guys were all playing, and they were all as good as you're going to. I mean,
Is any way
is
you're going to
anywhere,
go in
right.
the country.
And then you had the, you know, guys like Neil and myself were a little bit younger. We were
Yep.
kind of the upstarts, and Neil was working with Stovall, and you know, very dynamic. And both those guys put on great shows. And then there was another guy, Maynard Silver. I don't know if
I
you
remember Maynard.
Maynard was very entertaining. So there was a lot of good players.
There was. I remember the first time I saw Duke. He had just left Roomful and formed
Yeah.
the Pleasure Kings
Right.
with Tommy and Kenny.
Tommy, yeah.
And he opened for B.B. King. And after Duke's set, I remember just sitting there thinking, B.B. has to follow that.
Yeah.
You know, and of course, B.B.'s B.B. I
Right.
mean, God rest his
Yeah.
amazing soul.
Yeah.
But after seeing Duke that night, I was just, my head spun around. So I'd go to see him anytime I
Yeah.
could. And we hope to get him on. Duke's going to be on the show, folks. A couple months down the road, he's in production right now, working with some folks, but he's agreed to come on. So that leads us to the different types of guitars. When I see your hollow body, I think T-Bone Walker right away.
Yeah, that's
And I notice you've got P90 pickups on your Les Paul. And for the viewers out there, the P90s are a single coil pickup. So they have a different sound than what the dual coils that make a pickup like this called a humbucker. And they really have a unique character to them, and they're very unforgiving. So if you're playing great, they sound amazing. And if you're a little sloppy, they seem to reveal everything about your playing.
yeah. There's no hiding.
Yeah, what drew you to the P90 sound?
Well, I always liked P90s. I always liked, you know, when I would hear Duke, and Duke will be the first to tell you, I don't think he kept guitars more than a couple hours. He seemed like, I would talk to him, I would haunt Duke, I would come with a little pad, say, that chord that you're playing, and he'd like, get
Yeah.
away from me, kid, you're bothering me, that type of, you know, he was kidding around, but I was amazed at what he could play. And I've always been drawn to rhythm guitar, too. I always like the idea of how chords work.
That's the heart and soul of R&B music.
And you have to be a good rhythm player, you're never going to be a good soloist.
That's right.
But what got me, I would see Duke play these hollow bodies, and again, listening to music as a young person, where you're really starting to develop what you like, I had all these 78s, and the 78s used to come in like almost like a book. Mm-hmm. We'd have there was no 33s, no albums.
Right.
And you'd have these shellac, 78s. If you dropped it, it broke, but they would have pictures, and you'd see.
Do you still have any of those?
I've got a bunch. And
Pretty collectible
I got
stuff now.
all swing era stuff. Harry James, Tommy
Yeah.
Dorsey, Bunny Berrigan, and I would see when they did have a picture of the band, you'd see the guitar player playing a big arch top. Most of them weren't electrified. So I always loved the way that they looked. What got me to P90s, like a lot of guys at that time, we all played Strats. And nothing wrong with Strats. I think they're great. I think they're the most versatile guitar on the planet.
Yes.
But I started saying to myself, you've got to develop your own thing, like we all.
And everybody was playing Strats at one point.
So I said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I've got to go a different way. And I had a deal with Epiphone through a friend of mine to get artist endorsement. It was they wanted a copy of any product you did.
Right.
And they were looking for anybody. They would give you a discount. You buy it almost at cost. And I bought their version of the 295, which is basically a 175 with gold. And I put in, it had P100s, which were a little bit different, but I replaced those pickups, and I used that for a long time. And then I said, you know what, I've got to do something. It was kind of difficult guitar to play, short scale, a little short scale, not totally short scale, but it felt shorter. And I remember seeing Junior Watson. I don't know if you're familiar with Junior Watson.
Yep.
And I played with him a couple times, and he had we all thought it was a Les Paul gold top, but it wasn't. It was a copy, but it said Gibson on it, which was. But I played the guitar and loved it. He let me play it, and I really liked it. So I couldn't find one, but I bought another Les Paul with the Mini Humbuckers, which is a great guitar. And then I bought the one that I use 99% of the time.
Yeah.
I usually stick to one guitar, and I bring a spare on the gig, but I'm pretty much a one guitar player.
Very, very unique sound with the P90s.
Yeah.
I love the way they sound.
Yeah.
I think the first artist that really sold me on him was Les Dudek.
Oh, yeah, I remember Les Dudek.
He had a gold top with P90s, and his sound was phenomenal, and it really drew me into that sound. And for a long time, I had a Sunburst Les Paul with P90s in it. It was a deluxe, but it had real P90s in it.
They're great pickups.
And just a terrific sound overall. Let's play a little something. Let the folks hear what those things do.
It's like a Strat on steroids. I would always
Yes,
say.
that's a good analogy.
And of course, Guitar Slim, the great Guitar Slim, used P90s. Used a gold top. You would see a lot of pictures of him playing a gold top when he did things that I used to do and all.
Yep.
Which I can explain something that I did to this mic. It might be interesting. This is the neck pickup on the P90. You can hear it. And then you have your middle. Then you have your treble pickup. I have that turned down a little.
Yep.
But I put a switch in, which a lot of guys do. It's a pull switch. And you get that. When you put it in the middle, it might be a tad too. You get the T-Bone Walker sound.
Yeah.
And
That out of phase sound.
Little out of phase. And
Peter
that,
Green.
Yeah, a lot of guys would do that with the P90s because if they're playing any kind of T-bone, and if you turn the tone down on one of the pickup, it just really changes. So that's just a little thing most guys do with P90s. So, all right.
Makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
Let's play a little shuffle in B flat.
All right.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. That was great.
Oh,
Boy, you're getting some tremendous tone out of those pickups.
well, those are, I must admit, these are not the original pickups. These are Jason Lawler pickups, which I really like.
Yeah.
And these are his 50s vintage pickups. He has different, P90s, depending
Yes.
on the amount of output. I kind of like a low output pickup because I think you get better
More
tone.
tone.
You get more tone. And
More tone.
Same thing with keeping your action a little high.
It's funny how we get older, output, volume, all those
Yeah.
things kind of decrease because you
Small-
start to
Smaller
appreciate
equipment.
it.
Look, we're
Yeah.
using these. Like I'm using an 18-watt amp. You're using, a small. And
That's right.
The old
That's
days.
where the sound is.
Yeah, we
That's
mic
where the
everything
tone
up with a
is.
ton of equipment.
So that the viewers understand, this is a 56 custom shop recreation from
Exactly.
Gibson. And this one's a 58 custom shop recreation. I think we're in the golden age of guitar making once again, and I think that these custom shop pieces are every bit as good as the originals. I really do.
I totally agree. I mean, I've played, and Fender's doing the same thing because I've got a
Yes.
54 reissue anniversary Strat that just came out.
They're unbelievable.
And I've played old ones. I had never had an old Fender, anything that old, but I've had old Gibsons, and
Yeah.
they're
not all fantastic.
they made bad ones then too. It's
They
like
did.
like an old car,
And I think, when we talk about the vintage market out there, folks, if you go on eBay, check these publications, you're going to see that prices have escalated past the reach that working musicians can now afford.
Exactly.
And some of these pieces are just not that great. Some of them are phenomenal, but not all of them. And everyone thinks that anything made nowadays, 1970s back is amazing. And for a third of the cost, you can go to the custom shop and get something that's absolutely exceptional.
I think if you remember, I know it's your birthday, so in the 70s, the 3-bolt neck Strats, nobody wanted them.
I
We
know.
were always complaining that they weren't well made. We wanted stuff from the 60s with the 4-bolt neck. And then now you hear these young guys who are younger than us, and they love those guitars.
paying
And I'm sa-
thousands
they're
for
paying,
them.
And I'm saying I remember Tellys. Nobody played Tellys.
Right.
I could have bought a Telly for $75. All right, and I turned it down. I said, what am I going to do with that? And now
Our
they're
good
great
friend
guitars.
Neil Vitullo,
He
we were
loves
talking
Tellys,
about
yeah.
Tellys. I love them too. But we were talking about some of the early ones that we had owned that weren't that great.
Right.
And the custom shops making amazing guitars.
I think just because it's old doesn't mean it's necessarily good.
That's
I
right.
mean, and again,
And it's guys like you that know how to play them.
well, thank you. You're very kind. Same to you, and
get
same
a
to all
good
the
guitar
pros.
and a good amp in the hands of a real musician, and you're going to make music on anything you hand it.
It's the old saying: it's not the gun, it's the gunner.
Absolutely.
It's young players that go out and they want to buy all this expensive equipment, and if you're not. You can have all this great equipment, but if you're not ready to play, it's like playing golf and saying, I'm going to go out and get custom-made clubs, but
Right.
I've never gone on a golf course. I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to look good, but you're not going to sound
Practicing the
any good.
guitar is
practice.
what's going to get you the good sound.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about
Sure.
this beauty that's hiding back
Let me
here?
get that for you.
Um,
That's my other guitar.
now you'll see a real vintage one, folks. This is not a custom shop. This is the real deal.
Plug it in to give you a little taste of what it does. Now this is a whole different animal. This is a 1954 Gibson ES 350.
Absolutely gorgeous.
And I've had this for about, it is? Oh, it fell off, sorry. My apologies to the wonderful people of Taunton. How's that? This is a 54 Gibson ES 350.
That is gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a beautiful guitar. 2 P90 pickups. I've had this for about 7 or 8 years, and I've been very happy with it. I don't really take it out much anymore. If I'm doing a gig where I'm sitting down, I use it because I'm worried about
Right.
somebody banging into me.
Knocking it over.
And I never would put it on a stand unless something like this, because I've had guitars, we've played clubs. And things break, people
Yeah.
bang into you. They don't mean it, but they're dancing, and
happens.
it happens. So
With a vintage piece,
Yeah.
you're
whole different animal. I'm a
Yeah.
fan of big necks. My Les Paul has a very big neck.
Mine as well.
And I just like a big neck. And again, these are pretty much the way they come, you got to kind of use them. You can't do a lot of tweaking.
Right.
There's not a lot that can be done, but they're great for playing rhythm. Rhythm guitar.
And what's really cool, folks, is this guitar, even though it's a really big guitar to look at, it's much, much lighter than these Les Pauls are.
It's all hollow.
Because it's hollow. And when you hit the bass strings, I mean, the whole thing just resonates in your lap like an acoustic guitar.
Yeah, they're
no
great.
other guitar can get the sound of an arch top.
That's
can't
very
simulate
true.
it.
And the guys that played, I mean, Freddie Green, who played with Count Basie, who was, the premier rhythm guitar player in jazz. Now, he
Yep.
played acoustically, but you can hear, if you listen to those Basie recordings, the technology was not like it is today. You can hear he would I think a lot of times a Gretsch or a Stromberg, and you can hear him just chomping those chords away in the rhythm section. And again, it's that whole arch top. And guys today who play guitars like this, and maybe like an L5,
Right.
if they're playing big band, they try to emulate Freddie Green, and they'll turn the guitar way down because that whole approach, again, it's all, I'm not going to run. You get an acoustic quality to it.
Right.
So if you you can hear that whole.
You can
Just
hear
has-
the guitar.
You can hear it.
the
You can
tonal
the
qualities
tone of the
of the
qualities. And again, like my Les Paul, we have the switch.
wood. Yeah.
So you can get the T-Bone Walker,
Yeah.
just like, very nice.
That's right on the money.
And they're great. It's a great guitar. They're just fabulous instruments.
And those are what was called the dog ear P90 pickups.
Yeah, it had that like a dog's ear. Where
You'd
that.
see those on the Les Paul Juniors from the 50s.
Yep, and they were great. And that's more of what we would call the soap bar. 'cause
That's
it
the
looked like,
soap bar,
It looked like
right.
a bar of soap.
But
So-
underneath the hood, so to speak, it's the same pickup, isn't it?
I believe it is. I'm not.
I'm not 100% sure.
I'm not sure, and
So if any of you viewers out there know,
please tell us.
please let us know. But we think that it's the same coil underneath.
Yeah. Again, this guitar is it's 62 years old.
Right.
So
and it's in magnificent
it's in
shape.
great shape. And the pickups everything's original. I had it checked out, and they made them. These are the arch tops with Gibson especially. Most of the time, you're hard pressed to find a bad one. I've had some bad ones over
Yeah.
the years, but they're very well made.
Well,
They're
that was their
craftsmen.
flagship stuff.
Right.
I mean, when L5s and these kind of guitars were being made, there was nothing better in the world than a good Gibson arch top.
and Epiphone in its day.
Epi in its day was amazing.
And then I have a Guild that's kind of their takeoff. Now, Gibson made an ES5,
Yeah.
which is the 3 pickup version. And that's the one that you would see a lot of guys
Is
gravitate.
that what T-Bone played?
T-Bone played a blonde ES5,
Yeah.
and that was stolen, and then he went over, I think he was using like a Barney Kessel, which is a great guitar. But Guild came out with, and I almost brought it today, I could be wrong, it's like the X350 or X375, and it's the same, it's their takeoff on,
Yeah.
they were all competing, and Epiphone had the Emperor, which had 3 pickups.
Beautiful guitar.
Now, the Guild I have is a 54, same year, and when Guild just started, there were people that left Epiphone to go work for Guild.
Yep.
And that has 3 white pickups to their version of the P90, and it has all switches. And the switches are from a blender, actually, a Waring blender. So you'd punch in, the old phone operator?
Yeah.
You punch the switch down. And it's a great guitar, completely different than this, though, but very well made.
Yeah, those old Guilds are really nice. I think there was a guitar called the Manhattan that
It's
they
a great
made.
guitar, yeah.
There was a local
Aristocrat.
guitarist when I was growing up named Steve Rand, and he had a Manhattan, and he could play the finish right off
Yeah,
it. And
those are great.
He's one of the first guys I saw playing jazz. Let's play a little bit.
Sure.
Let's do some slow blues and
You want to do a little T-Bone-S stuff?
absolutely. Let the viewers hear.
Sure. We'll
Hear what that guitar
I'm on the key of G. That's a good T-bone
You got
key.
it.
All right. How about...